There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello, BookTube. I'm Shawn the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel and to another episode of Zooming In, a series where I engage with bookish social media luminaries the world over to talk about book-related literary writerly articles online. And I'd like to welcome back for, I believe, his third appearance on this series, one of my most popular guests, Brian of the BookTube channel Bookish, joining us from Texas. Hello, Brian.
Hello, Shawn. Thanks for having me again.
We're here to talk about We're going to do a two for today, two articles that really kind of resonated nicely. The first one is from the CBC Books website called Since When Did Reading Books Become a Game? By Natalie Stetchison. And that came out in January. And we're pairing that with an article from Book Riot that also came out in January called You Don't Need to Treat Reading Like Going to the Gym by Gia R. The initial R, Gia R. So maybe subconsciously I invited you to talk about this topic because of your BookTube at the Gym tag years ago, which I have very fond memories of, Brian. But get us started. What did you make of these articles?
The one about making reading into a game, my first thought was, and I'm sure this is true for you as an educator, my first thought was anything that gets kids to read, or gets anybody to read, I'm okay with. Like when you're a teacher, an educator, if you can find something that's a hook that works, a challenge, I'm all for it. And I don't see any reason to worry about those things or to make those things seem like a negative. And I think this article kind of felt a little bit like, a hipster kind of looking down their nose at the thing that's popular, kind of attitude to, at least in its approach, or at least in the way it sets itself up a little bit. I don't do reading challenges. I don't even have like a book journal where I write down what I read, but I think it's great if people want to do it and if it helps, and if the reading helps enrich their lives or it's worthwhile to them.
So you don't do any of the gamification things with your reading life, but you're not judging others for doing so.
I do participate in like reading months. Like I have a hard time not engaging in a lot of reading months because in a lot of ways, can't remember, is this article or the next one? I think it's the next one. In a lot of ways, those reading months have really helped me diversify my reading a whole lot, which is probably the biggest thing that BookTube has done for me as a reader, is make me read more diversely. I intentionally engaged in those things so that I would read more diversely, because I think that that's important, particularly as narrow as I used to read. Now to feel like, and you're kind of the king of this anyway, I read much more widely and diversely. It's just a great thing.
I'm the queen of what now?
Reading diversely.
Well, I do my best, but
you're the empress of bailing, though, and the queen of diverse reading. There you go.
And one of the reasons that I connected a bit more with the Book Riot article was she was valorizing DNFing. So I said, read diversely and bail the crap out of stuff that you're not interested in. And yep, that's me. Although
yeah, that's true.
a little bit off topic, but I haven't bailed on a book this year. I haven't bailed on a book since last November. What hell?
What? You're going to lose your crown, scepter, title, whatever it is.
But actually, that is pretty central to my approach to this, which is, let's back up. Historically, about 6 or 7 or 8 years ago, I started to get back into reading hardcore and started listening to Book Riot podcasts and also signed up for Scribd for a full year before I actually ever started reading anything. Like I really kind of dipped my toe in the water.
Right.
And then the focus of Book Riot and so on was to diversify your reading as much as possible. So I did the read harder challenges 2 or 3 years in a row. Then when I got into BookTube, all kinds of reading challenges and so on. And that gave me many opportunities to try new things. And the results of much of that was that, I've tried a lot of things and I really didn't like any of them. But the most successful thing was reading books in translation from around the world. That was a big success, but that I still prioritize literary fiction. Tried a bunch of genres and realized what a load of crap they were, and and I'm now back ensconced in my ivory tower reading literary books and
I
having
do, I like you. Well, not like you because you read only literary fiction. I primarily read literary fiction, but like you were saying, hopefully more diversely in terms of, works in translation and gender situation of the author and all those kinds of things that I wouldn't say that before I was like prejudiced against those authors, but they just didn't. I had this opinion that they wouldn't speak to me because I wasn't that person. Do you know what I
yes,
mean? And that's a kind of prejudice, which is ridiculous because humanity is humanity. And the best works
absolutely.
of literature are going to make us feel, empathize, relate to whoever, which is what's great. So,
Sure, and understand ourselves better in the process. Yeah, yeah,
absolutely.
sure, for
And
sure.
understand, our presets and our prejudices and get beyond them.
That's right. So that has been a real gift for me. And I agree with you. Whatever game or reading challenge or bingo card or whatever that is going to get more people reading, I'm all for it. And getting more people reading and getting people to read more is different. And this is, I forget which of the articles stressed this. Maybe they both did in their own way. That's a different thing than reading more books. Like,
Yes,
so the pressure to read and consume more and more books without necessarily understanding what you were reading, or you know what I mean? Like the
right,
number, the goal, how many books you were going to read in one year was the overarching metric. And
right.
I agree with that critique.
I don't think that your goal in reading should be a number of books, but if that setting a number helps you read more, then I think that's great. Like when I see people who have a reading goal and they say, I want to read 48 books this year, and I go back and watch their channel and they've read like 57 books, I think, okay, that is an
Oh,
example
sure.
of that working because they didn't just stop when they got to 48 and think, okay, I've done it. They kept going. So I kind of like when I see people set the number, what I think is reasonable for a normal person to read in a certain in the period of a year, and then go beyond that because they were just so excited to continue reading and to continue picking up more books.
I think it probably boils down to what your personality's like. Like if it's stressing you out to have a reading goal, don't set a reading goal like in the number of books.
Yeah,
Um, and I also am very much opposed to the competitiveness of how many books people read. And so that is why, because I doubt I read more books in a year than you do, but I
you
probably
probably
read
do.
more books than the average Joe on
Right.
BookTube or on Bookish social media. So I don't publicize my number.
Right. I don't usually even think about counting till I get to the end of the year and I'm trying to make my best of video. And then I have a vague idea of how many books that I read, but I probably am about 60. I think that if I were to pick a number, I'm somewhere around 60 a year. I think last year a little less, but that and to me, like I said, I don't keep a book journal. I don't have Goodreads. I don't track my reading because that feels like homework. That feels like making a book report or something to me, and like adding
Well,
something to it. I'm not.
I'm worried you're going to get kicked off BookTube now if you don't do any of that stuff. I think
Yeah,
that's
I've thought
kind of
about that. I don't
mandatory.
confess it very often.
I track how much I read on Goodreads, and if people want to snoop around in all my various shelves, because I've got about 60 or 70 shelves, they can find out how many books I've read in a year with the
Yeah,
bales subtracted. So the number of books that I actually finished, but I don't talk about it publicly, and but I
right.
am very aware of it myself, and so I
Well,
am competing with my previous year's number, or I want to do better or whatever. But I just don't talk about it that way publicly because I don't want to encourage that competitive with other people.
right.
Personal
Well,
best.
yeah, and me not tracking isn't a virtue. It's laziness. I just don't want to have to do extra work. And a lot of times, if I'm having good reading month, I'm having a pretty good reading month this month. When I'm getting to the end of a book, I'm already looking forward to the next book and I have it ready. And I like right now, I know what book I'm reading next. And it's not that I'm frustrated, I'm still reading the one I'm reading, but I'm really looking forward to starting that one. So it'll be a matter of putting that one down and picking the other one up. And I don't want to have to record something or write something down or whatever in between. When I do stuff like that, the most I do is I make a video. Like if I make a review of a book, it's because I really like the book. And that kind of tracks it for me. And that's how I keep track, I guess.
Oh, absolutely. Like really, my Friday reads going back 6+ years now is that's my reading journal
Yeah,
in video
me too.
form. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So
I go back and look at my wrap up for every month, and that's where I remember if I read this book this year or last year, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So
What I liked about the Book Riot article was that it suggested ways to challenge yourself that weren't about how many books you read in a year and offered alternatives to the various standard games, book
yes,
gamification things. Like to read so many books a year, they suggest read for a certain amount of time each day or each week. Instead
right.
of we're focusing on the number of books, how much time you could make that kind of a goal. And I like that very much. I'm thinking I might try that.
I think
And
that's good. Yeah,
yeah, the second was instead of reading only the books you own or the books you've already purchased, which is another common, it's not really a game or well, it's a kind of a challenge, I guess.
it is.
The alternative resolution was revisit X amount of current TBR own and choose to read at least X amount to read this year. You don't have to just only read it, but
Right.
set a more reasonable goal. And that
Yeah.
makes sense. I'll do one more. Read more diversely, which is the
Hmm.
one that has worked best for me.
Me too.
Um, and the alternative one is read one book from a different genre each month. Try one book with a character or idea that is not familiar to you each month. So to just moderate your book challenges so that you don't
Right.
get yourself worked up,
I like the
feeling
analogy this article made with going to the gym, because going to the gym is something that for most people is not something they look forward to. And I think if you make put reading on that level of something you have to do because it's good for me or I should do it. And everybody, this would be something that improves me. And all those things are great. But if you make it that kind of a chore, that kind of several years ago, right before I started making booktube, I went to the gym every day and it just got to be a habit and I liked it. But when I stopped going, it was going again was just like, oh my God, I don't want to do it. And I think if you treat reading that way, you're going to fail because how long can you make yourself do something that you find to be unpleasant, that you are not enjoying doing? And alongside of that, a lot of people think they have to read these classics or they have to read these books that they were supposed to have read in college or high school. And I'm like, the heck with that. Find something you're interested in. Read whatever it is you want to read. And if you really get in the habit of reading, then you might want to go back and read, Dickens or something like that. You might want to at that point, but you're not gonna. That's a hard way to get into reading, I think, is by intentionally choosing to read things that are from the 19th century instead of the 20th or the 21st and are 500 pages long instead of 250 pages long. There is nothing wrong with a 200 to 250 page book. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. They can be great. There's nothing wrong with reading. Sorry, Shawn, romance or mystery or if that gets you into reading and that's what you like to read, I think that's great. You don't have to read the books that people tell you have to read. I think that's just completely wrong-headed. I think they didn't mention this article. I think those two things often go together. People set this New Year's goal, I'm going to read more, and they go, what am I going to read? And they go, well, I never read Great Expectations. I didn't read that in high school. I made an F on the test or I squeaked by, so I'm going to read it. And my goodness, it just feels like setting yourself up to fail. The same way with
yes.
going to the gym and saying, okay, I'm going to work out for 2 hours is setting yourself up to fail. You're not going to do it, not for
So
long.
is a Jordan Peterson reading challenge, is that still qualify as reading, Brian?
Uh, sure.
But please
I
lose my
certainly would
number and
encourage you to do better at some point, but if that's what's going to get you reading, but I would say that, the books that Jordan Peterson, all these Jordan Peterson, Stoicism, booktubers, and lifestyle guys on YouTube are about where they want you to read Marcus Aurelius or something like that. I mean, come on, you're not going to start. That's not the place to start reading and to get into reading. You have to develop the habit and the love first, I think. The whole thing about the reading challenge is excluding people who can't read fast or have some kind of disability that prevents them from reading. To me, to a certain extent, I think if you feel excluded by a challenge that's out there, like where it's Goodreads, read as many books you can, or whatever it is, challenge, then I think then the second article where the alternative challenges are
giving
really
you some,
is what you should
absolutely.
be doing instead of following the trend. Set your own challenge, find a different one, something that you can do if there is something preventing you from other than want to.
Yeah, well, sure. And I'm a very slow reader. It's not that I can't read fast, but I hate having to read a book too quickly.
Yep.
Even a novella. I've never read a book. I don't think in my whole life have I ever read a book, even a novella, in one sitting. People are always saying, "Oh, you could read it in one sitting." It's like, why would you want
Yeah.
to do that?
I'm like, that's the, if you said, if somebody tells me it's one, it's at least two for me. Because I don't know. I'm a slow reader in part because I'll read something and go, hey, well, that's kind of interesting. And then I'll like think about something and then I don't know, I'll
Reflect on
get
it in tranquility. Yes,
right
yes, yes, yes.
and then come back to it and read that sentence again. And I thought I would be interested in reading faster when I started BookTube. But I'm not interested in trying to make myself read faster because I enjoy my reading the way it is. And I think that's kind of the key to all of this is to read in the way that you enjoy the most, whether that's 5 books a year or 105 books a year. It doesn't matter whether that's all romance or all Greek classics. I can't imagine that, but that doesn't matter. Whatever you want to read is what you should read. And I would also just say, I'm not sure that while I love reading and I think it enriches my life in all kinds of ways, and I like the idea of more people reading, just like, not everybody's ever going to be somebody who goes to the gym. Not everybody's going to want to read. If you don't feel like it's improving your life in some way, or enriching your life, or entertaining you in some way, I don't know that sacrilege. I don't know that you even have to read at all.
No,
Um,
God, no. No, no, no.
so
Of course not.
anyway,
Yep. So maybe we need to have a slow reading. You and I need to come up with a slow reading challenge or a slow readathon on BookTube. There's actually the CBC article concluded with that. There was a book group, I think in Vernon, British Columbia. They've been reading Robin Wall Kimmerer's Braiding Sweetgrass for 2 years.
I saw that. I saw that. That seems slow. That's really slow.
Well, yeah, and I wondered if it means they're starting it again and like they're rereading
oh, I
it
don't
over
know.
2 years. I don't know, but because that's a
I'm,
very, very slow read. I haven't read the book, but I know it's only about 250 pages perhaps.
yeah.
So for
I
over 2 years.
Yeah, I like the book, but I don't think I could stretch it out. I wonder how many of them read ahead and are already done and just go back and reread the parts they're doing that week or that month or whatever. So the problem is in coming up with our slow reading challenge is I don't want to read a long book. I'm kind of at the point where I finished a long nonfiction book for March of the Mammoths this month, and I liked it. And I felt like I got stuff out of it that I enjoyed reading, but I don't want to read a really long work of, of fiction.
I think
So
slow read could work for any length of book. In fact, it probably works better with a shorter book, like an
I,
average length book or a novella. But to read a novella over 6 to 8 weeks and really,
yeah,
think about it, read a
yeah.
chapter a week or something. Yeah.
I wonder if at some
Well, I'll
point
think about that.
okay. I wonder if at some point that a section of it on that minute level would become irritating in its own way. You know what I mean? Where we're literally I think there's a like so also with the hard books or the long books or the books people say, oh well, you got to read this supplemental thing, you won't really understand the book. My opinion is then I just don't want to read that book. If I have to read another book to understand the book I'm reading, I don't want to read it, and I'm not that interested in dissecting all the symbolism or all the thematic things. I still at this point in my life am kind of like my high school self who said if I don't get the symbolism from reading it, then the author failed. You shouldn't have to point it out to me to a certain extent. Once I understand what symbolism is, and I admit you have to read to understand that kind of thing. Once I understand what it is, if I don't get it, then either I wasn't paying attention or the author didn't make it work for me, or it just didn't work for me because it didn't. But
But I have very unorthodox views about symbolism. I feel about symbolism the way I feel about religion. It's all bullshit. There's no such thing as a symbol. There are images that we can attach our own meanings to, but symbols that have a universal meaning, bleh.
I have a tendency to agree with you. I think the things that I oftentimes people I was listening to somebody who reviewed James by Percival Everett. I listened to a review of that today, and I thought that is not what I got from that book at all. It was almost completely the opposite of what
Yes.
I thought. And so I thought one of us got it wrong, or maybe both of us got it right.
Well, sure. Yeah. Everybody reads different books when they read the same book. But as soon as I hear people talking about symbols, I change the channel. What nonsense. This was not nonsense. This was a wonderful chat. Brian, always a great time chatting with you about this kind of stuff. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's always fun to come talk to you.